We've now learned some tools that we can use to control the object referenced with the keyword this. We can correct the problems we have encountered. So let's look at some of those problems from the previous topics and solve them. We will do 3 examples together, and then I will have you do a couple of them on your own as a part of an exercise. All right, the first example we're going to look at is the passing a reference to a method into a variable and then using that variable or invoking that variable. If you remember, let me just go ahead and paste this in. I'm going to label each of these examples so that you can refer to them when you look at the code files. So we declared a function up here, and then we have an object down here, and we go ahead and make that function a method on that object. We're able to do that by just putting the name of the function. And so we have a function here, we have a method here. Now we go ahead and assign that method, obj.displayName, to a variable. And then we try to invoke the variable. So let me go ahead and open up the console here. I should have done that before I started messing with the code. Now we can go ahead and save this, and let's see what happens. If you remember, we get this uncaught type error. Cannot read property name of undefined. So remember, since we're using strict mode, the keyword this does not reference the default object, the window. It becomes undefined, and that's why we get that error. So how would we go about correcting this? Well, we've learned both call and apply, and those could both be used in this situation. So if we do call, and then obj is the object we pass in for the keyword this. And let's go ahead and see if that works for us. And that does. We could have also used apply here, of course, and we get the same results. So that fix was pretty simple. We can specify what we want this to represent, and it's obj in this case. All right, now let me go ahead and comment out that, and we're going to copy in another one. This is example 2. This is a callback example using set timeout, if you remember. So let's go ahead and put that one in. So here we have our object, and it has name property, and it has a display name method. And then in the set timeout, we refer to that method, obj.displayName. And if you remember, after 2 seconds, we have some problems. We're basically not getting anything because it cannot find name on the default object, which becomes window. Because set timeout, the way it's handled, remember, it's added to the event queue, and then the JavaScript engine picks it up. Window becomes the default object, and it can't find the property name on that default object. So what could we do to correct this? Now, first off, will this work? If I'm going to go ahead and copy this, put it on a new line. I want to have these different approaches here so you can see them. Would this work? Could we do call and then pass an obj? There's actually a problem with this, and I want you to think about that for a second. What is the problem with this? Why would this not work? Let me go ahead and save this and see if that gives you a clue. Watch the console here. It worked, right? It displayed the name correctly. But did you see how quickly it did it? It was right away. So basically, what happened here is the set timeout was ignored. This call invokes it right away. It's not passing in a function that will be invoked after 2 seconds. It's invoked right away. And it works because it's invoked right away. But we could accomplish the same thing just by doing this, right? Because that's invoked right away as well. All right, so I'm going to put that back. That one doesn't work. That doesn't do for us what we need. But you're probably thinking, well, This looks like a perfect opportunity to use bind, and you're right. Because remember, bind returns a function. So it's not going to invoke it right away, it's going to return it. And so that function will sit there and wait for the 2 seconds. All right, let's go ahead and try that out. And there we go. It works for us, and it waits 2 seconds. Now, I want to show you one other approach to solve the problem that we encounter that you will sometimes see in code, and in which you may want to use as well. Another approach is to use a different function completely as the function that's passed in. Use an anonymous function. So we declare it right here inside of the setTimeout function. We declare it right there, and it's an anonymous function. This will be the function that will be fired after 2 seconds. And then inside of that function, we can call something else. We could do obj.displayName like this. And that would work for us, because now obj is the object that's invoking this function in here. This outer function is the one that's handled once the timing feature of the browser releases it to the JavaScript engine. So let's just go ahead and look at that one. We wait 2 seconds and we get the correct name. So that is another approach, and you will see that approach. That's a pretty common approach in JavaScript. So be aware of that. So in these cases, you want to use bind or you want to use this approach. All right, now let's go ahead and comment out all of that. And we're going to look at a third example. And this third example, this one's a good one. This is the original problem we used to illustrate how this keyword operates in certain situations. So let me paste that one in. So now remember, we have an object, and then inside the object we have a method, funct3. And then that method, when it is invoked, down here we invoke it down here with the correct object, but when it's invoked, it calls another function that's inside. And this function here will log this. And so for console log 3, we get the correct this, we get obj. But if you remember for console log 4, because this function here is not being invoked by this object, we get the default keyword, which in this case will be undefined because we're in strict mode. Now, that functions how this keyword should function. There's nothing wrong with that. Based upon the rules, that's working the way it should. But what if we wanted to force this function to display this object? Because why else would we put this in here unless we wanted to refer to the object which it's contained? So first, let's save that, and we can see that it does, console 3 does display the correct object. Console 4 does not, displays undefined, so that's not working. Now this is a bit tricky approach. This is why I wanted to show this particular example. Could we correct this by simply doing .call and pass an obj? Now think about that. Is that going to correct it? Is that going to solve the problem for this one in here? It's not. It will act on function 3, which is not a problem right now. If we save this, we still have the same problem. So that's not going to work for us. So let me just go ahead and remove that. What's another way we could solve this? Well, we could do it with call. Remember, we could come in here, .call or apply, and then pass in obj. Now if we save it, now we get the correct object. So that would work, as would apply. And we could use obj, or we could use this, because right here, this refers to the object. So if we save that with this, that works also. Okay, so that's, I want to show you one more approach. I'm going to comment out that one. We'll put back funct4, invoke it that way. Is there a way we could solve this with bind? And that's a little bit tricky approach, and that's why I wanted to show this. Could we do bind so that this function for, when it invokes, has already obj bound to it for the keyword this. Well, we could. We have a function here. So this function's been set up. What if we just go ahead and do dot bind right here, pass an obj or pass in this, either one, same thing as we did down here. At this point, this is going to refer to obj. But if we save that, let's see if that works. And it does. It works because now this variable contains a function that has obj bound for the keyword this. Without this part, it would just be a function. And I want to just change that to this so I can show you that that works as well. Okay. Now I hope you understand why we're able to put this here. It's still referring to the object, anywhere within that object, because it's not inside a function that's being invoked in a different way. All right, so we're passing in that object so it can be bound. And then that new function that's returned because of bind gets placed here. Instead of the function that we set up, we return a new function using bind that has obj bound for the keyword this. So kind of a neat approach using bind there. All right, so those are 3 examples in how we can solve them. Now in the exercises, we have a couple more that we haven't solved yet. I'm going to have you do that as part of the exercise. So let's move on.